865, a fleet appeared off the coast of Northumbria. Not a raiding party, a fleet. Dozens of longships, thousands of men. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle calls it the Mysel here, the great heathen army. English scribes had seen Norse raiders before. They knew what a raid looked like. This was something else. The army had a stated purpose, not silver, not land, revenge. Their father, they said, had been thrown alive into a pit of serpents by a Northumbrian king named Ælla, and they had come to collect the debt. Their father's name was Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar Hairy Breeches. That name alone should tell you something about how history remembers this man. Half legend, half joke, entirely impossible to pin down. The sagas paint him as a near mythological figure, slayer of a monstrous serpent, husband of 3 remarkable women, the man who sailed up the Seine and made the king of the Franks pay rather than fight. A man who, according to the stories, grew bored with peace and went looking for something that could actually kill him. Here's the problem. Not a single chronicle written during his lifetime names him. Not one. Every account we have comes from sources written 2, 3, sometimes 400 years after the events they describe. The main saga, the Ragnar's Saga Lothbrok, was compiled in Iceland sometime in the 13th century. The events it claims to describe happened in the 9th. That's a gap of 4 centuries. You could fit the entire history of the United States twice into that silence. So what are we actually dealing with? A real man who became a legend? A legend built around several real men? Or something in between? A name that got attached to stories that already existed? A hook on which a culture hung its greatest ambitions and its deepest fears? Let's start with what we can actually prove. 845, the Seine River. The Annals of Saint-Bertin, a Frankish chronicle written close to the time of events, record that 120 Norse ships entered the river. That number matters. A typical Norse raid of the period involved maybe a dozen ships, 30 men, a fast strike on a monastery or an exposed coastal settlement. 120 ships meant thousands of fighters moving in a coordinated column deep into the interior of Frankish territory. The leader is named in the chronicle as Ragnarius. He reached Paris on March 28, 845, Easter Sunday, which was almost certainly not a coincidence. He hanged 111 prisoners on an island in the Seine in full view of the Frankish defenders on the opposite bank. The point wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was a message. Your God cannot protect you, your king cannot protect you, and I am not leaving until you make it worth my while. King Charles the Bald, grandson of Charlemagne, ruler of West Francia, had an army. He divided it on both banks of the river and tried to hold the Seine. Ragnarius destroyed one division, hanged the prisoners, and waited. Then something unexpected happened inside the Frankish camp. A sickness broke out. Dysentery, possibly. The chronicles are vague on specifics. Men started dying in significant numbers. Charles interpreted this as a sign from God and made a decision that his contemporaries found humiliating and that historians have been arguing about ever since. He paid 7,000 pounds of silver. Not pounds in the modern sense. These were Carolingian pounds, each roughly 408 grams. The total was somewhere around 2,600 kilograms of silver, enough to fill a room, enough to fund a small kingdom for years. Charles didn't pay because he lacked an army. He paid because the disease in his camp convinced him that God had withdrawn his favor from the battle, and because he calculated, correctly as it turned out, that paying once was cheaper than losing Paris. Ragnarius took the silver and left. The Annals of Saint-Bertin note this without further comment, which is its own kind of commentary. This moment, this single transaction on Easter Sunday, 845, is the clearest historical anchor we have for anyone connected to the name Ragnar. Whether this Ragnarius is the same man as the Ragnar Lothbrok of the sagas is not something any historian can say with certainty. The name is a cognate. The timing fits, but fits is not the same as proves, and that distinction is everything. What the sagas describe is a life that spans decades and continents in a way no single human career could plausibly sustain. In the Ragnar saga, he kills a dragon-like serpent as a young man to win the hand of a woman named Thora. He later marries Aslaug, who claims descent from the legendary hero Sigurd and the Valkyrie Brynhildr. He raids England, France, and stretches of the Baltic. He fathers a small army of sons, each given an epithet that becomes a story. Ivar the Boneless, Björn Ironside, Sigurd Snake in the Eye, Hvitserk, Halfdan. Each son is a saga unto himself. Björn Ironside is credited with a Mediterranean expedition around 859 to 861. The Annals of Saint-Bertin and several Arabic sources describe Norse raiders attacking the Iberian coast in this period, passing through the Strait of Gibraltar, hitting North Africa and the Balearic Islands, and eventually sacking Luna in northern Italy, which they reportedly mistook for Rome. Whether this Björn was Ragnar's son is impossible to verify. The genealogy is what the saga claims, not what any contemporary document confirms. Ivar the Boneless is better documented. When the great heathen army lands in 865, Ivar is its named commander. The Annals of Ulster reference him as Imhar and note his death in 873 with the phrase, King of the Norsemen of all Ireland and Britain, a title that suggests a man of genuine historical weight, not a footnote in someone else's story. What boneless actually referred to is unknown. Theories range from extreme physical flexibility, possibly a condition resembling Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, to a mistranslation of a Norse epithet, meaning something closer to fierce or impetuous. The sagas themselves offer no medical explanation. The pattern that runs through every account of Ragnar, whether saga or chronicle, is repetition. He keeps going back. Rouen is raided and then raided again. Paris is attacked in 845 and again in 857. Irish coasts are hit in cycles. This is not random opportunism. This is someone who understood that a place that paid once would pay again, that the threat of return is itself a weapon. You don't have to burn a city every year to profit from it. You just have to make them believe you might. This is what distinguishes whoever Ragnar was from the generic Norse raider of the period. The strategy wasn't hit and retreat. It was strike, demonstrate overwhelming capability, extract payment, withdraw, return. The Franks were effectively paying protection money years before the English formalized the concept as Danegeld. And Ragnarius, or whoever was operating under that logic, at that scale, appears to have been among the first to industrialize the practice. There's another episode worth examining. Even though it exists entirely within the sagas and has no contemporary corroboration whatsoever. The Ragnar's Saga describes his final expedition to England as a deliberate act of self-diminishment. He went with 2 ships and a small crew, not because he lacked resources, because his sons had grown famous in their own right, and he couldn't tolerate being surpassed. He wanted one more thing he could claim alone, as himself, without the army at his back. You cannot verify this. No chronicle mentions it. But the psychological logic is recognizable across cultures and centuries. The aging warrior who mistakes recklessness for courage, because the alternative is accepting that his moment has passed. Whether or not it happened, it describes something true about how people in this era understood greatness, not as accumulated wisdom or reputation carefully managed, as accumulated risk pushed further each time until it breaks. The saga says he was captured by King Ælla of Northumbria, that Ælla had him thrown into a pit of snakes. The sources for this are the Ragnar Sona Tatter, a short Norse text sometimes called The Tale of Ragnar's Sons, and Saxo Grammaticus, a Danish historian writing around 1200. Neither is contemporary. Saxo is writing 3 centuries after the events he describes, and he acknowledges it openly. He relies on oral tradition and on men who had memorized old verses, and he says so in his introduction. His Gesta Danorum, The Deeds of the Danes, is a remarkable document, but it's a mixture of verifiable history, literary amplification, and mythology that Saxo himself doesn't always distinguish between. What the sources agree on: Ragnar, captured and facing death, spoke. The exact words vary by text, but the most famous version runs something like this: how the piglets would grunt if they knew what the old boar suffers. It is a message. The sons will hear. The sons will come. He is not lamenting his fate. He is loading a weapon. Whether he said this is unknowable, but the fact that multiple independent sources, written centuries apart, preserve some version of this final speech suggests it embedded itself deeply in Norse cultural memory. Why? Because it's exactly the right thing for that man to say, in the logic of that world, at that moment. Truth in the sense of it happened, and truth in the sense of it captures something real about how people understood a life, are not always the same thing. Sometimes the second kind is what survives. 865, the army lands. What happens next is, for once, reasonably well documented. The great heathen army wintered in East Anglia, where the local king gave them horses, calculating, apparently, that cooperation was less dangerous than resistance. In 866, they moved north and seized York on November 1st, All Saints' Day. Northumbria was politically fractured at the time, split between two rival kings, Osbert and Ælla, who had been fighting each other for the throne. The Norse exploited the division with precision. They took the city while its defenders were occupied with each other. In 867, the Northumbrians launched a counterattack. Both kings died in the attempt. Ælla is named among the dead in the chronicle entries, which are brief and factual about the outcome. What happened to Ælla specifically is where the sources diverge sharply. The English chronicler Reginald of Durham, writing in the 12th century, mentions that Ælla's death was unusually brutal, but does not describe the method. The Norse sources, particularly the Ragnar Sona Thatter and certain skaldic verses, describe what they call the blood eagle. The victim's back was cut open, the ribs severed from the spine, the lungs pulled through the wounds and spread outward. The victim was reportedly still alive during parts of this process. Historians have been arguing about the blood eagle for decades, and the argument is genuinely unresolved. Roberta Frank, in a 1984 paper that remains influential in the field, argued that it was a literary invention, a misreading of Old Norse poetic metaphor. Skaldic poetry uses eagles as symbols of battlefield carnage. A poem describing an eagle feasting on a king's back could easily be misread, centuries later, as a literal account of a ritual execution. More recent scholarship, including work by Luke John Murphy, has pushed back, arguing that the number of independent sources referencing it, including some that have no obvious reason to dramatize the same detail, makes a purely literary origin harder to sustain. The honest position is, we don't know. Ælla was captured. Ælla was killed. His death was remembered as extraordinary. Everything beyond that is the sources doing something more complicated than simple reporting. What cannot be disputed is what came after. The great heathen army did not leave. They had arrived claiming revenge. They stayed to conquer. Over the following 15 years, the sons of Ragnar, or the men who operated under that banner, or the men around whom that legend crystallized as their power grew, dismantled the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of Northumbria, East Anglia, and Mercia in sequence. Ivar campaigned across Ireland and northern Britain simultaneously. Halfdan pushed into Mercia. Only Wessex, under a young king named Alfred, held. And even Alfred spent years on the run in the marshes of Somerset before he found a way to fight back. In 876, Halfdan formally partitioned Northumbria among his men. They didn't occupy it as a military force. They plowed it, settled it, raised families. This was the beginning of what English sources would call the Dane Law, the Dana Lagu, the Law of the Danes, a region covering roughly the northern and eastern portions of England, where Norse custom, Norse law, and Norse rulers prevailed for generations. York, Jorvik, to its new inhabitants, became one of the wealthiest trading cities in northern Europe within a few decades. Archaeological excavations at Coppergate in York, conducted through the 1970s and 1980s, recovered a detailed picture of that city. Workshops producing leather goods, textiles, carved amber, and intricate metalwork, dense urban housing, evidence of active trade networks reaching from Ireland to Byzantium. Not a military occupation, a civilization that had grown up inside the bones of another one. The Danelaw lasted in various forms for close to 2 centuries. The last Norse king of York, Eric Bloodaxe, was expelled and killed in 954. But the marks left by this period did not disappear with the political entity. Norse vocabulary entered English and never left. The words sky, knife, law, husband, window, anger, flat, ugly, all of them come from Old Norse. The language spoken in England today carries this inheritance invisibly, in daily conversation, in words people use without thinking about where they came from. Place names across the north and east of England still mark the territory. Any English town ending in by, Grimsby, Whitby, Derby, Selby, takes that suffix from the Norse word for farm or settlement. Thorpe means secondary settlement. Thwaite means a piece of cleared land. The landscape is still, in this very literal sense, partly written in the language of the men who said they came to avenge their father. Whether Ragnar was real, whether he died in a snake pit, whether his sons knelt over his body and swore revenge on an English king, none of this changes what happened next. The outcome is in the ground. It's in the language. It's in the law books. It's in the genetic record. A 2015 study of Y chromosome distribution in England found significantly elevated levels of Scandinavian genetic markers in regions that correspond to the historical boundaries of the Danelaw. The men who came to avenge a possibly fictional father left biological descendants who are still there. There's something worth sitting with in how Ragnar's legacy compares to those of his sons. Ivar the Boneless held Ireland and Britain simultaneously, which the Irish annals treat as a historical fact of some weight. Björn Ironside, if the sagas are accurate, reached the Mediterranean in an open wooden ship without charts or compass, a feat of navigation that is difficult to fully appreciate from a modern vantage point. Halfdan divided a kingdom and handed out parcels of it like estate grants. These are documented acts, or semi-documented acts, by men who changed the map of Europe in concrete and traceable ways. Ragnar himself appears in one chronicle entry under a Latinized name, asking for silver, and yet the saga built around him is the one that survived, expanded across centuries, and eventually became the primary lens through which the Viking Age entered popular consciousness. Why? Possibly because he sits at the origin point, the father of the army, the cause behind the cause. Every great consequence needs a first cause, and the snake pit is a first cause that resonates at a level below rational analysis. The oldest mythological layer of Indo-European tradition involves a hero and a serpent. Ragnar doesn't slay the serpent at the end. He dies surrounded by them. It's the inversion of the hero pattern, and inversions stay in the mind. Or possibly because the sagas, whatever their factual reliability, understood something accurate about how power actually works. Not through a single decisive battle, but through the accumulation of reputation. Ragnarius took 2,600 kilograms of silver from the king of the Franks and left the king alive to tell the story. The story was the point. The fear generated by the story, the calculation made by the next city that weighed the cost of fighting against the cost of paying, that was worth more than burning Paris to the ground. A man who understood reputation as a weapon, who grasped that being talked about is itself a form of leverage. Such a man would not be surprised to learn that people are still talking about him 12 centuries later. He might have planned on it. In Norway today, Ragnar consistently ranks among the top 100 most popular male names. In England, Ælla is not used at all. The man who threw him in the pit has been completely forgotten outside academic footnotes. The Man Who Supposedly Died in the Pit is a television series, a recurring reference across popular culture, a name that carries weight for people who couldn't tell you a single verified historical fact about him. The Suns came. They built something real, and the name they carried with them The name they said they were avenging turned out to be more durable than anything made of silver or stone. If you want more stories like this, where history and legend intersect, and the line between them turns out to matter less than you expected, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.